this Dakota Life Virtual, we're going to help you get your fishing equipment ready for the new season. Or maybe if you've been inspired by social distancing to maybe get back to it if it's been a few years, we've got just the person to help get all of that fishing gear ready. It's Maggie Lindsay, who's the Education Services Coordinator for Game Fish and Parks, speaking to us from her home near Pier. Hey Maggie, nice to talk to you.
Yeah, nice to talk to you guys too.
Well, now you're no stranger to Dakota Life. This is a little different topic, but we've seen you before.
Yes, years ago I did a special where they followed along with me during opening of pheasant season. That was a wonderful experience for me. I had my old Springer Spaniel Scout who was about 10 or 11 at the time, and we had just a wonderful day, a wonderful hunt, and she actually put up a rooster that we were able to shoot in frame while we were filming. So it was a really nice experience.
Well, it's great to have you back. Now, as Education Services Coordinator, you help do a lot of outreach for Game Fish and Parks, but very specifically, this is a great time to help people get their fishing equipment ready, and we're going to talk specifically about a spin cast reel. Let's take a look at that, and why don't you walk us through getting that prepped and how we can clean that up and have it be in best shape for the season ahead.
Well, a spin cast reel is usually the reel that we start on. It's a very simple reel, very inexpensive reel, probably the most best-selling reel in the country, and it's a great reel for either kids or beginners. The reason they call it spin cast is, well, I'm not really sure, except that it's a closed-face reel. The reason it's good for beginners is it's very easy to learn with. And it also, with the cover on the front, it prevents a lot of tangles, so which are very common with young kids and beginners.
Well, of all ages too. Well, when you get ready to work on this, let's take a look at the tools that you want to have in mind.
Okay. Yeah, this is kind of my recommendation. You can buy this at any of the sporting goods stores, or you might substitute some other items like WD-40 for the oil and such. But I found this at Runnings here in Pier. It's a nice, the cleaning, there's Real Clean, Real Butter, which is just basically a real oil, Real Grease for the gears, and then your basic tools, like a toothbrush is handy. I kind of jokingly said, don't steal your spouse's, find an old one. Q-tips are handy for getting in all the little nooks and crannies. And, of course, needle nose pliers. I don't think I go anywhere without a needle nose pliers. And then different kinds of screwdrivers. You'll have to look at your reel and see what kind you'll need, but probably need both Phillips and a slot head. You know,
with a lot of folks have those tools in their toolkit and the items around the house. As far as it comes to the cleaners and the grease and the lubricant, is that something that you could substitute, or you really want to look for the specialty products for fishing equipment?
I like the specialty products, but I've used, for instance, the same cleaning equipment that we've used on our firearms before, gun cleaning equipment. The oils are usually about the same. So.
Well, let's get a close-up look. Let's start in now in the process, get a close look at the cover on that spin cast reel.
Okay, so this is, I was just kind of wanted to go over the parts, because when I show you how to clean it, it's easier if I kind of teach you what each part is first. This is the cover on the reel. It covers the spool of line and the internal parts of the reel, and protects them a lot from dirt and other debris.
And then there's the handle.
The handle, yes, of course, what you use to reel in the line. The nice things about these Synergies, this is the main reel that we use in our program for beginners, is that you can switch it to either left or right-handed. And I recommend you do that on your reel, just to make life easier for you. Makes it easier to fish. If you're left-handed, you'll need a right-hand retrieve, and if you're right-handed, you'll need a left-hand retrieve. That's the line release button. What's so simple about these reels is you push that button to start releasing the line, and then as you swing the rod through the air, you release the button at just the right point, and it releases the line. That's the drag reel. the drag wheel. The drag wheel, drag is how much pressure is on your line. For instance, if you catch a fish and you start fighting the fish, you want it to be able to pull some line out. Otherwise, you might lose the fish or break the line. So a drag is something that you set depending on what kind of fish that you're fishing. And the nice part about it being on the top of the reel, if you're struggling with the fish, you can reach right down and change the setting while you're fighting the fish.
Well, let's get underneath. Why don't we'll talk about removing that cover and getting the cleaning process started.
All right, so it was kind of a series of pictures I took as we were cleaning it. To release that cover, you just take your hand on it and turn it counterclockwise. Before you take the cover off, pay attention to how it was on the reel. Some reels are different, but this is for the Synergy, and most of them just basically screw off. So screw off the reel counterclockwise. But pay attention. So, all right, and then the next thing you want to do is you want to remove the handle. You'll see that there's a screw there. That's the cover. It covers the reel screw. It's a cover. I think we call it a cover screw. So there's the inside screw that you're going to need to unscrew next that will actually release the handle.
So then there's a disassembly process that should look like this. How do you get to these steps?
How you get to those steps is first you remove the cover, screwing it off, unscrewing it, and then you remove the handle, and you do it by removing that screw cover and then that long screw right there. You'll have to be careful now because most of these reels aren't metal anymore. A lot of those screws are plastic. So just be careful not to strip them out. They should come out quite easily, but don't over tighten or over loosen anything. It should just come right out for you. Then you can gently pull it apart. To get that center part out, you might need to press the line release button to get it to come off like that.
And then the cleaning process starts.
Cleaning process is wipe out the inside of the cover first. It's amazing how much dirt and debris you'll find in there. And in South Dakota in the spring, you'll find a lot of cottonwood once you start fishing for those striped bass, those early bass, and the smallmouth that we fish for early on. You'll get a lot of cottonwood and debris in there. So make sure and wipe that clean. And then just look it over and look for other dirt in nooks and crannies. This is where the Q-tips come in very handy. I like to dip it in the cleaner. As you can see, it's blue already. And then you just kind of wipe and clean everywhere that you see dirt. The toothbrush is handy for cleaning off old grease. This is a nice new reel, so I really didn't have a good example of what old grease, dirty grease looks like. But a toothbrush like that is wonderful for removing the old grease.
Well, then you get to this point, and it's time to re-grease and begin to get things lubed up and start the reassembly process.
Yes, and on this one, be careful on your grease. You don't need very much. You only need a couple of drops. And then I just kind of rub it in with my fingers. But once you get the reel put back together, you can kind of spin everything and get it worked into there. Now, oiling the bearings, they're kind of hard to see in this picture, but when you have that's where the reel handle goes in, and you look inside, you'll see those little, they're bearings inside of there, and you want to put a couple drops, you don't need too much, a couple drops of that reel oil in there.
When you're satisfied that things are ready to go, you kind of have to go in reverse order and work your way back to the beginning on the reassembly.
Yes, and one thing I should have mentioned, when you're taking it apart, I put a towel down, lay the parts out as you took them apart. It's easy to lose little parts or to forget how you put it together, so just make sure you have it in sequence. The first thing you want to do is kind of carefully slide that internal part back into the back frame. It will fit if you get it just right, but it might take a little finagling to get it in there just right. Then the next thing you need to do is get it, the screw handle, the handle screw back into the reel. You'll kind of have to hold it together with your hands while you're doing this. It was interesting trying to take the picture and hold it at the same time without it falling on the floor apart. So just very carefully put it in there. And once again, after you tighten it down, be extremely careful not to over tighten. And of course, you're going to work the handle off on the opposite side. You're going to slide it into the slot, and you'll feel when it goes in correctly. It just kind of pops into place, and then very gently, once again, without over tightening, screw it into the handle. And this part is screwing on the cover. Sometimes you need to kind of screw it a little bit offset so you don't get it cross-threaded. It's real easy to get it cross-threaded. Just screw it. You'll feel it when it starts sliding on and then you just screw it right back on. So
now, if you're going to use the same line, of course, at this point, you want to make sure you get the line back out through the hole in the front of that screw cover.
Yes.
Yeah, because actually, this may be if you wanted to change your line. First off, we'll walk through those steps, because basically, if you're not going to change your line, you're reassembled. You can get that reel back on the rod, and you're ready to go. But if you want to think about changing out your line, let's start off with how you can tell or when you should do that and where it might fit into this process. How do you know when it's time to change your line?
So when you're looking at your reel, go ahead and pull some of the line out and run it between your fingers. You're going to feel rough spots, or you're going to see that it has a lot of memory. Memory means that it's curled up in a ball. And that means you're probably going to have to replace your line. I recommend replacing line every year. I'm kind of perfectionist. When I fish a lot, I'll actually replace line on my reels more than once a year, maybe 2 to 3 times a year sometimes, depending on how much I'm fishing. They get damaged. If you use them a lot, they get damaged. Line is relatively inexpensive. And as you can see on these pictures of line, look for a kind of line that will work for your reel. It will usually say on the reel what it takes. There's different choices you have, but look at the pounds. One is is 10. That Stren is 10-pound test. Tri-line is 6-pound. The Vanish is 4-pound. So look what your reel is rated for, and also think about what you're fishing for. If you're fishing for smaller fish, it's better to go with a smaller line, like a 6-pound test.
And your reel may have an indication of what pound test is recommended? It'll say?
Yes,
okay.
yes. It should say on the side of it.
Okay. Now, let's take a look at some of the process if you're stripping the old line off, and how you want to make sure the new line is secure and wound back onto the spool.
Okay, what I usually do is I just press the line release button and I start pulling the line out, and I wrap it around my hand. It's going to take you a bit to get all that line off of there, but this process seems to work real well. This reel is off of the rod for photographic purposes, but sometimes it's easier just to leave it on the rod when you do this. The best way and once you get all the line off, then the best, this is the best knot to use, the arbor knot. It's a very simple knot. It consists of 2 overhand knots. That's all it consists of. What I recommend is, if you want to learn how to do the overland knot, this arbor knot, you can either have somebody teach you how to do it, or you can go online to YouTube videos and learn how to do it. Extremely simple knot to use.
You know, and I should point out too, let's go back to that shot, Paul, where you can see where the line is through the front of the cover, because you don't want to get it wound back on and realize that you haven't run it through the cover, or you're going to have to undo your knot. So it's obvious, but I have forgotten that myself. So I wanted to. It's a good shot that you included with that fluorescent line through the cover, and then okay, you're all set to start putting line on. How much? How do you know when you have enough new line on your reel?
Well, it'll often say on the side of the reel how much it holds, but that's just kind of irrelevant. I just crank it about 50 times and then take a look. You'll have to unscrew the cover again and take a look. Also, before you reel the line back on, you're going to have to screw the cover back on.
Sure.
I guess we should have mentioned that too. But then you'll unscrew it and take a look at the spool inside of there. What you want, the ideal situation, is a 1/8 inch from the edge, from the rim of the line spool. You don't want if you have too little, then you're going to be a little handicapped fighting fish. But too much is actually worse than too little. Too much, you'll end up having tangles. And it'll go over the side of the spool, and you're going to end up having a reel that is not going to work. You'll be out fishing and it suddenly won't work because you have a snarl in there. So ideal is 1/8 inch from the edge.
Well, let's do a final check and finish up. What do we do to get ready to load up and head for the lake?
Oh,
Yeah.
I guess I was expecting another picture, but yeah. Now you need to mount it on the rod, and of course, I would rig a casting plug on it, take it out in the yard, and cast it a few times. Just make sure everything's working correctly, and then tie it up with your best lure or bait or hook or whatever you want to fish for, and head to the lake. This is a perfect time in the state to go fishing.
Yeah. Do you have any, on the website, gfp.sd.gov/fish, are there some things that you might want to recommend that people look for as right after they get their reel cleaned up and they want to make plans to go out and do a little fishing?
Well, there's all kinds of good information on that. It'll tell you about the different species of fish that you can fish with. There's a little bit in there about access. And then we also have on our Facebook page, we often have updates on there. Lately, I've noticed that there's been a couple updates from one of our staff that's been going out and catching walleyes and putting nice pictures on there. And he fishes from shore, so it's very easy to do. So I would just kind of recommend that. We also have a few publications at South Dakota Game Fish and Parks. We have a book just on the fishes of South Dakota that will help you identify your species. And also they're also listed in the regulation books. If you want to get one of the fishing regulation books, it has wonderful information on it. And I also recommend that people download the app for their phone, the South Dakota Game Fish and Parks app. That's just a wonderful app. So you could be out there fishing anywhere and you can just, okay, what kind of fish is this? You can pull it up on that app and kind of look that fish up.
And while you're on that website too, of course, don't forget you can get your fishing license online, and then you're all set to go. It's great to run into a wildlife conservation officer and get some information, but you want to make sure that you can show him your license as well.
Absolutely.
Maggie, you've been very generous with your time. Thank you for walking us through on how to get fishing equipment ready for the spring and to enjoy the summer in the outdoors of South Dakota. Maggie Lindsay is the Education Services Coordinator for South Dakota Game Fish and Parks. Again, Maggie, thank you very much. Good to talk with you.
All right. Thank you, Larry.